Hi, everyone. I'm Maggie McGrath, editor of Forbes Women. Non-human identities outnumber human identities by a measure of 82 to 1. This number comes from Rubrik, and our next guest is the Chief Transformation Officer of Rubrik, Kavitha Mariappan. She's going to talk to us about how to navigate that threat. It affects businesses, it affects individuals. That's astounding. So 81 to 1, non-human identities to human identities. It just feels like our data is everywhere and impersonation is everywhere. Is that fair?
I mean, Maggie, absolutely. I think we're sitting sort of at this precipice of the AI explosion, right? And which presents innovation opportunity that is just unsurpassed. I mean, we've never seen that before. Many of us, I think, are so fortunate that we get to live through 2 industrial revolutions in our lifetime, the internet being one and now AI. And all of this is sort of predicated on the amount of data, the vast amounts of data we have collected. And that data creates and presents so many opportunities for us to do so much, improve lives, better medicine, remote education, be able to, do things at scale. And that's really what AI presents, the opportunity to comb through a vast amount of data to get signals and telemetry so that we can do things at a rapid scale, speed, veracity, amplitude than we ever have. With that comes risk. Right. And that's what we're really talking about, right? How do we manage sort of this next evolution that we're going into, which is agentic AI? And you touched upon kind of this, the identity aspect of it, where Rubrik Zero Labs' recent report focused on identity unveiled that, for every 1 human identity, we're starting to see 82 non-human identities, whether it's machine or agentic identities. And what that means is, for every 1 human worker, you can have today, 82 plus non-human workers. Imagine what that can do for our business. But at the same time, unmanaged, without the right guardrails and processes in place, that also presents an amplification of risk within organizations.
I went on the Cyber Alliance site to see just how many data attacks, cyber attacks there were this year. Over 2 days in October, Volkswagen, Mango Fashion, a city in Indiana. How many cyber attacks have you seen through your work at Rubrik this year?
Well, without giving you an exact number, what I can tell you, the cyber attacks are on the rise. Every organization sees cyber attacks sort of impacting their perimeter of defense, right? And I think the ability for these attacks to sort of penetrate their front line of defense depends on what they've put in place, what measures they've put in place from a detect, prevent, recover, resilience perspective, what their sort of defense in depth looks like. From that same research, that survey that I mentioned earlier, we surveyed a little over 1,600 security and IT leaders of very large organizations, and 90% of them have experienced at least 1 cyber attack this year. That's an astounding number, to think about. And 11% of them have actually experienced more than 100 cyber attacks in the year.
And I've also heard you talk about among those who are attacked, and there are different types of attacks, of course, but ones where ransom is requested, only 16% of organizations ever recover their data. This feels like an existential issue for corporations in America. Do you see it that way?
I truly believe so. And I think there's always a philosophical debate between do we pay ransom or not, right? Now, threat actors are motivated by lots of different things. There are malicious threat actors. There are nation state actors, and I think it's really important to understand, and I think now as we start thinking about kind of the deployment of AI, we're also going to see whether it's sort of malicious intent, right, intended compromise, or unintended errors within our organization where we've got agents going rogue and all of this happening. But I would also say, when we think about ransomware, AI also helps threat actors perpetrate ransomware attacks in a very sophisticated way, right? They're able to do social engineering, they're able to do vishing and phishing and use deep fakes, and in a way that looks so authentic that it does sort of, people do fall prey to this. And organizations, want their data back. They're in a crisis situation, and many of them pay ransom, right? And as part of our recent, survey, one of the things we discovered is 89% of these organizations that paid ransom didn't get their data back. And I think there's a paradigm of double and triple extortion. There is, I extort you once for ransom in hopes that, you'll pay me and then you will think I will return your data. But there's no guarantee that they haven't exfiltrated enough of that information, especially if we're thinking about PII data, which is personally identifiable information or patient health information, right? And I think we as leaders in the industry have a duty of care, to the constituents of all the businesses, whether it's a healthcare business, finance, retail, et cetera, as we gather and store credentials, we want to make sure these credentials are not compromised. AI does present an opportunity for threat actors to really perpetrate significant sort of crimes, specifically around ransomware. We're definitely seeing an increase in ransomware attacks, no doubt.
I started with all of this just to kind of frame your work. Rubrik is an $18 billion market cap company as of yesterday's trading close, more than 3,000 employees. It's a huge organization that not everyone has heard of. So are companies coming to you after they have received a ransomware attack, or are they coming to you and are you working with them to prevent these attacks?
Well, we would like everyone not to be a statistic. Let's start with that, right? And I think, when we think about security, it's really important to think about preparedness, right? The security industry has always been about, let me help you prevent. We want organizations to build resilience, so build that sort of preparedness. We would much rather not help you recover from an incident. Obviously, we're there to do that, right? We work with lots of organizations who have been impacted, and we go in and we help them to kind of recover their data and get their businesses up and running. But really, so much of our work is really to raise awareness around the criticality of investing in resilience as a primary part of your security strategy rather than an afterthought, because you do not want to be a statistic. And we want to, at the end of the day, cyber risk is business risk, right? We want to make sure organizations can maintain business continuity and they're up and running, their critical applications up and running, their data is secure. I mean, let's just take, if you're a retail manufacturer, a retail store, you want to be able to continue to sell retail goods. We want to be able to make sure you can access your inventory, your point of sales, you can service your customers. I mean, with critical infrastructure, for example, right? We want all organizations in the private and public sector to be able to continue running. And I think that's the thing. We want to keep the world safe and secure.
What are the conversations you're having with folks in the C-suites across America? And are you talking to the chief security officer, the chief information officer, the chief data and analytics officers, all of the above? Yeah. What's an average day in your role like?
It's a great question. And I would say it's all of the above now. And the appetite for the urgency, and I think kind of the aperture is really widened. Chief Information Security Officer, Chief Information Officer, so security, IT, Chief Technology Officer, whether it's infrastructure, architecture, applications, especially with AI, Chief Financial Officers. Chief Financial Officers own risk. Right? Usually financial organizational risk, and now cyber risk is one of the largest contributors to that, overall assessment of risk. Chief legal officers in many organizations, they run governance, compliance, and risk in those organizations. And CEOs, because they care, they want to know. And I think more importantly also now, boards of directors, because they do have a responsibility. When we talk about risk and talk about fiduciary responsibility that boards of directors have in guiding these organizations, it's really important that they're helping guide these organizations and ask the right questions. Do they have the right cyber hygiene in place? And so my day, is obviously spent working with our R&D organization, being very close to our product and our platform, and also out there with our customers and our future customers. One, raising awareness in terms of the importance of cyber resilience, and I would say data resilience as we start to think about AI resilience as well, right? What that presents. And two, inherently not thinking about backup your backup data, and the ability to recover and be resilient as an afterthought or an insurance policy, but really as a critical and integral part of your security strategy and your operational strategy.
What are the types of companies or examples of clients that you work with? Are they names we'd recognize?
Absolutely. Domino's Pizza is one of them, for example. We work with PepsiCo. It's another really big organization. So I would say we run the gamut of Fortune 500 and Global 2000 across multiple industries, including public sector, state, local government, and federal government.
I mean, given the Indiana City cybersecurity breach that I mentioned, it really is everywhere. And as you talk about data hygiene, you talk to a lot of C-suite folks, but how much should rank and file employees be thinking about this? Is it their responsibility to be managing their own cyber hygiene, or is it the responsibility of the C-suites of private public sector companies to be informing their workforce?
I think it's top down, bottoms up, right? Australia is a great example where they were in the news for so long with so many high profile cyber attacks that the nation, from a federal perspective, as well as the state governments, took a real sort of legislative and governmental stand on actually they have a cyber minister, for example, and about creating end user awareness. The normal citizen having some level of like a cyber knowledge quotient, having user awareness, knowing if you get an email like this, what you need to be doing. Maybe don't write your passwords on post-it notes and leave them everywhere. It's that. But at the same time, practitioner awareness is a big part of our work as much as it is kind of informing the C-suite. We're talking, we talked a little bit earlier on about this AI explosion and this industrial revolution that we're part of, which is super exciting. At the same time, we have a skills gap in the industry, and we need to make sure that as leaders, we are empowering our teams, our practitioners, with the right skill sets to sort of tackle, not just, all the cyber threats hitting sort of our perimeter. It's a pretty robust environment, but also what's emerging in terms of like the amplification of risk with AI, but also the opportunities that AI is going to, is presenting, not going to. I'm making sure they have the right skills. So it really is like, thinking about the organization, I would say horizontally and vertically, we all kind of have to level up. I think, and the other thing is even boards of directors. I did a session with the NACD, National Association of Corporate Directors, yesterday with one of our board members. There's a lot of interest in like thinking about what the board composition looks like. Do we need to start having people with cyber acumen sitting on board, sort of guiding some of this, and going forward, AI acumen.
I was just about to ask. There's interest, but I imagine there's a gap in expertise. And how do you think about communicating through that gap? Because I imagine you could probably talk to a CISO and use the uppermost vocabulary knowledge. You can go fully jargon with that CISO, but you're talking to a board with folks from different industries. How do you think about communicating so that the information gets to where it needs to, and they're thinking about the cyber risk in a mission critical way and in a sophisticated way, and not just baseline knowledge?
That's a great question, Maggie. If we talk to board members, I think one of the things, a language that works with them, board members and CFOs, is quantifying risk, right? Quantifying risk from a fiscal perspective, from an impact perspective, an exposure perspective. And I think that's also interesting because we talk as technologists, as security leaders, as IT leaders, they're trained to talk about the bits and bytes, right? So there is definitely kind of an up-leveling, there's a reskilling that needs to happen where, one, we have to teach them to become better communicators in terms of your ability to articulate those tenets in a way that a board member and a CFO or a CLO, chief legal officer, can actually understand, to act on and guide you on. And a lot of this is around risk quantification. I mean, at the risk of oversimplifying this, we'll talk about as a CISO, and you understand kind of what the risks are to your environment, what your critical applications are, what that looks like. And if you have a cyber attack, for example, what that might look like. Now, some of the work that we do, and I actually, my organization, we've built a value economics team. For example, we have also launched a cyber resilience maturity assessment, going in there and baselining what an organization's cyber readiness maturity looks like based on industry, peers, for example, right? So if you're retail, what does that look like? If you're a healthcare organization, what does that look like? Now, when we start to baseline these things, we start to be able to quantify them and say, well, if we have an impact based on our overall sort of exposure, this could be a $500 million incident. Should we not be up and running in a month? Now, CFO and board members are going to sit up and listen to that. Well, what does that mean? Break it down for me. It means these are areas of critical exposure for us. And in order for us to minimize the impact and risk and the blast radius, this is what we need to do. And this is kind of the budget and the funding I need to be able to go do what I need to do. And we're starting to create sort of tools that help build assurance. So I think part of this is also us, I wouldn't say up-leveling, but shifting the narrative and creating the tools. Just shifting the narrative doesn't help. We have to start creating the tools in the industry, the frameworks for all of us to be able to baseline, compare, sort of look at comparative, models and kind of assess, how bad is my risk? Or is my risk good? I mean, one way to look at it would be drivers, right? When you look at your driver, your car insurance, there is good risk and bad risk, right? Me driving my car versus my 20-year-old daughter driving my car. Different risk, right? And so I think those are the type of things, tools we need to start creating and really start educating the market and be able to start educating the board and helping also IT and security leaders and a C-suite be better able to communicate some of these.
As you talk about IT and security leaders communicating to employees, I'm thinking about the employee experience because sometimes, and I know you work with companies that have been around for decades, these are, I don't want to say old in the bad sense, right, but these are legacy businesses that have been doing things in a certain way for a very long time. It can be hard to innovate. It can be hard to bring in new tools, technologies, strategies. And from an employee perspective, I'll say at Forbes, the way we've leveled up our security can sometimes result in me being kicked out of a database or document hours into a project. And an autosave, fortunately, allows me to not lose the work, but it is a poor user experience when at 3 p.m., I've been working since 7 or 8 a.m. I am me. I thought I secured my identity for our systems, and yet something times out. I need to log in again. Right. That's a poor experience. How much does that enter your conversation?
What a great question, a great point, actually. IT and security, I think, one of the things they're doing, within sort of infrastructure, security, and controls is to ensure that you are protected. First and foremost, that's kind of the premise of what they're doing, right? Re-authenticating, making sure your credentials are authenticated. But I think walking in the shoes of the employee and kind of figuring out what that user experience is often something leaders don't do. Right. And security for the longest time has been known as the Department of Know, as in N-O. And one of the things we want to do is shift that to the Department of Know, as in K-N-O-W, right? Get to know, walk in the shoes of the business. And when I say the business, it's the lines of business within the organization. So if you're an editor, you probably have a deadline at a certain time in the day. And so turning access off at 3 p.m., potentially not a great thing. Maybe that, re-authentication has to happen at a certain time in the day. It's really, really sort of understanding kind of the business needs, right? And we want security and IT to protect us, build the infrastructure and the networking tools and the controls to protect us and enable and provide us with the applications to do our jobs. At the same time, we want to be empowered to do our work. And I think as we shift into kind of this era, we're shifting into a completely digital native era. We have young people entering the workforce that are 100% digitally native. And they want a work experience and a user experience that is 100% mobile and seamless, whether they are working from home, the office, anywhere, and one that is actually permissive. Meaning, if you think about 10 years ago even, there were certain applications, like if you were on a business trip, you could not access, say, Netflix in your hotel room from your work laptop. It's just not allowed. Right. People want to be able to watch Netflix as long as they follow guidelines and policies. Does it matter to us that they're in a hotel room on a business trip and they're watching a show. So I think like it's really a question of what kind of show, right? Like think like there are rules and guardrails, but we need to allow our employees to be empowered. Like we need to create a better place of work. So it really is understanding kind of user behavior. And I think this is where machine learning and AI give us so much behavioral and demographic and usage telemetry that help us sort of build the workforce of the future, kind of what practices and habits people want and what we should be building towards.
I could talk to you for hours about data security and also what it means for the individual experience, because it really does touch all of us. But I just got the 5-minute warning. So I want to circle back to your title, Chief Transformation Officer. What does that mean to you? Why are you not Chief Technical Officer or Chief Information Officer?
My job is to focus on go-to-market transformation here at Rubrik, right? We are deeply invested and focused on creating a category around cyber resilience. So what my work really focuses on is to work with the C-suite leaders, with boards of directors, with policymakers, with technologists, with standards bodies, and sort of create this sort of gravitational push to create this category around cyber resilience as a legitimate category. And that requires me to sort of sit in sort of the intersection of data protection, of identity, of AI, of the consumers of this, as well as our own organization in terms of how we build our products to make sure that our products are consumable. At the same time, those who engage with us as customers have a great experience with us from full life cycle of that. So, it is really about transforming Rubrik, and it's really about transforming the industry.
You mentioned so many different constituents that you speak to in your role. And to close, I'm wondering if there's one sector of American business that you have found is resistant to your message, or public or private, in your conversations, you're finding they haven't thought about it enough. Who would you put on notice as we head deeper into the AI revolution?
Maggie, one of the things we see is highly regulated industries are usually early adopters of new technologies. I would say financial services, even healthcare. It would be surprised how they're early adopters because regulations sort of drive compliance in a sense. The folks I would say that you want to put on notice are the ones, I would say retail. You've seen a lot of retail incidents lately because one, their supply chain is very robust. Right? And two, there's a lot of organizational debt and inertia within these organizations, a lot of legacy technical debt, as well as organizational structures, a lot of third party and suppliers and contractors, manufacturers, small businesses that sort of make up these businesses. And I would say there's definitely a lack of preparedness within those industries. That would be one that comes to mind very quickly. And large established organizations that, a lot of this, 50% of this is a people problem, right? Not a technology problem, like shifting the Titanic when we think about people are afraid of what happens to my role. And you see strong, revolutionary leaders coming in and really thinking about kind of organizational transformation and change management that is really required to sort of cut through some of this red tape and some of this sort of legacy for us to kind of embrace this new world. Whether we like it or not, shadow IT is in their environments as is shadow AI.
Shadow IT and shadow AI. That is an important warning. Kavitha, Mariappan, thank you so much for joining us. We'll have to have you back to report on the data that you keep uncovering, because just where we started with the non-human identities growing over the course of this year, I fear where we'll be in a year, but thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.